Good evening and welcome to Speaker's Corner UK on a third consecutive night. This must be a record. Good evening, Stops. How are you, my good sir?
I'm okay, thank you. Is it really the third? Oh my goodness. You know, people might get the impression we're obsessed or something.
Yeah, or we've got some time, which is cool. So, what are we going to do tonight? As the title says, we're going to continue and finish off part 3 of Answering Atheism, and we're on the part where Stop Spamming joined Hamza's den, and he's currently speaking to Hamza and Imran. And so we're going to continue pretty much a few seconds from where we left off yesterday, and we'll go through to the end and see how long that takes us. So with that, let me share the screen.
It's actually a pity that Subur's laptop died and then his phone couldn't hack it or something. So he wasn't there, but maybe on the other hand, it's also good because it didn't get derailed so much.
Yeah, I think once you have more than two on one, it becomes much more difficult to follow a coherent train of thought all the way through, because other people jump in with different thoughts and stuff like that. And we don't want Hamza exploding if he's not going to speak. So probably good that it's a smaller number of people.
Something I didn't mention last time. If anybody in the chat thinks we're missing something, please let us know. Because remember, if you think that there's something missing, others also think so. So it's always good to point that out so that everybody benefits from this.
Yeah, we can always miss something. None of us are perfect. We're bringing up, we're not taking notes ahead of time here. We've watched it over once, obviously, and we've seen it, but we haven't taken...
I haven't.
I haven't taken excruciating notes on every single point because that could take us like a week to do. So we're going to go through it here, and on the spur of the moment, we'll stop things and, pick up on things that we think deserve some critique. So with that said, let's get straight on into it. Here we go.
I agree with that. Perfectly,
Fantastic. Fantastic. So atheists shouldn't go around telling theists a creator doesn't exist because it's illogical to do so, because you can't prove something doesn't exist. Yeah?
No, that's wrong.
That's wrong.
No. You can't word it. You see, you're wording different things. You need to pay attention to your words that you're using.
What did I say?
If you are saying gods don't exist, then this is correct, because no God in the last 50,000 years that people have tried to provide evidence for gods and have failed, no God has ever been demonstrated to exist. So it's time to let go and accept the fact that there are no gods, and this is why I'm saying there are no gods until somebody has been provided to evidence that they do exist. Until that happens, there are no gods.
Can an atheist prove God doesn't exist?
No.
Right. So,
well, I might slightly disagree with you. It depends on the nature of the God and whether you can show an internal contradiction.
Yeah.
Then you could prove it, but again, you've got to, and it was the same thing, and we'll cover that hopefully at some point. When I was on the EF-Dawa, what does he accept as proof? If they're going to ask us, I can present what I would accept as proof, but he's got to, because if he says you can't prove it, what does he mean, right? So we've got to be very clear here on what he means, so that we can attempt to provide something that we know he's not going to accept it, but at least we're going to present it for the viewing audience. Okay, here's my criteria for evidence. Right, we're going to try and present something that potentially meets that criteria, unless that criteria is you set an impossible bar, in which case we need to point that out as well. So somebody could set an impossible bar and say, I could never be convinced. Obviously, then they'd be dogmatic. But if somebody sets a bar that, hey, if I don't see it, I won't accept it, well, that's potentially an impossible bar, especially for proving something that you potentially will never see. So I think we just got to be careful on what he accepts as evidence, or at least the criteria for what that is.
Yeah, I took mine. Yeah.
So should they make the claim God doesn't exist?
Yes.
But then if they make the claim, shouldn't they provide proof?
No.
No? Doesn't the one who make the claim provide, is the burden of proof upon them?
No, I can argue my case. I just told you, you need to listen. I just argued the case. I can argue this. I don't have to provide evidence or something. The thing is that...
Okay, well, I think strictly, it depends what you mean by evidence. But if you're going to argue the case, I think what you mean is, well, potentially, let me ask you, do you mean that you've got to give reasons?
Well, I see it more as counter evidence. Okay, yeah, you can say it's reason. All right, I'm hooked on this word evidence because I gave the reasons, which is a logical reason. But
that can be evidence, right? It's not everything is.
And this is the point. Exactly.
Yeah.
This is the point. But I was taking it too literal and too tight. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Oh, but it's
because,
good to
yeah,
hear what
reason
your
can.
thinking is, right? We need to know what were you thinking at the time, and maybe it's just a word that's slightly different, that clarifies it. But I do agree with you in the sense that, and you didn't say it in that words, that I think, disbelief in extraordinary claims is the default position, because the opposite of that is absurdity. Then you're going to believe any supernatural claim, even if it hasn't been demonstrated or hasn't, evidence hasn't been provided. So you
Yeah.
wouldn't want to, you go down the road of absurdity. So I think denial of supernatural claims, if and until they have been sufficiently demonstrated, whatever that might mean, either empirical evidence or, a knockdown philosophical argument or whatever the case is, or even a sound and valid philosophical argument, that we count as evidence in favor of it.
The only problem I have is that I don't like bringing up this default position because it leads to red herring arguments. I've done this a couple of times, and I've heard the ensuing discussion that happened. This was like totally useless, because as soon as you as soon as you bring up words that they don't really understand, but somebody has told them, well, if this comes up, then you need to say this. Then you first need to explain everything, because if you take the default position, you need to explain where this comes from. Then you need to explain, well, it's the null hypothesis. What is a null hypothesis? Well, this is the lack of a differentiation between one point and the next. And then you need to explain why this is the case here, and why. Then it becomes tedious, and you're not really doing anything, because you need to explain something that they will never understand. So it's an endless discussion, and this is why I don't like bringing that up that way.
But don't you think that one way you could avoid some of that is by saying, hey, let's consider the alternate hypothesis, that you believe every supernatural claim that's been put out there. Don't you see that you could say to somebody, don't you see how that would lead to absurdity? If you are not going to dismiss extraordinary claims, if you're not going to accept them a priori, in other words, if you are going to accept them a priori, it leads to absurdity. So the opposite seems to be the most reasonable position, or the default position, which is rejecting supernatural or extraordinary claims until there's good reason to believe it. Because otherwise, which Hamza thought he was very smart in rejecting, and I explained it to him again, very carefully, that somebody could say, well, hey, you can't disprove a unicorn, or whatever the case is. Which if you're going to go by that, if they're going to go by that standard that you can't disprove something, then that's fine, but then they've got to live up to that standard, which means that they can't disprove any of the other fanciful claims that humans have made over thousands of years. And so I was just thinking that if you present it in that way, hopefully, if somebody's paying attention, they can see that that's an absurd position. I mean, they might argue for a third position, but I don't know what that might be.
I like that, yeah. I just need to remember it the next time it comes to that, because I like that, yeah.
It just avoids having to go into what's the null hypothesis and why is it the default position. I mean, you are explaining why it's the default position. They, of course, these guys will claim that Islam is the default position. But the good thing about that claim is it can be falsified, and I think you and I are quite satisfied that it has been. So the default position from their worldview is that everybody's born with this innate fitra. Interestingly enough, of course, they never say that this innate fitra is a belief in Allah. They just say it's an innate belief in a God. Again, going.
Yeah, because it's the Christians who demonstrated it, apparently, allegedly.
Yeah, and of course they haven't, though. But the Muslims have taken it one step further and claimed at least it's falsifiable. And like I say, we have groups of people around the world that have never in their history believed in a God. They believed in fanciful claims of things, but then of course when it suits them, the theists, or in this case the Muslims, will then go, well, that means that they believed in a God. No, it doesn't. So when it suits them, they throw nuance out the window. When it doesn't suit them, then they suddenly want to get nuance. It's just totally inconsistent, right? So I'm quite satisfied that a fitra claim has been disproven, but that would be their default position. I have the opposite.
Okay, but this is just as an explanation. This is why I like my approach of saying, well, none has been demonstrated in the last 50,000 odd years. So why should I accept it? Why should I provide evidence when you are making the claim you've never provided anything? So I'm not going to say that I need to. So I think this is a lot easier without having to explain anything.
Okay, so maybe, like you say, you're getting hung up on the word evidence, but if you had to give a reason why you're an atheist, then you would give a reason, isn't it? So whatever there is, like you say, nothing's been demonstrated in the last 50,000 years. Therefore, I'm justified in taking the position that I do not believe a God or gods exist, and I think that's most
So there's no good reason. Yeah, exactly.
Well,
That's
that's
what I
a
always
reason,
say.
right? So maybe when they say evidence, you can either ask them what evidence means, or in your head reword evidence to mean, all I'm going to give you is a reason why I'm an atheist, because that's really what they're
Yeah,
asking.
let
So
me
when
try
they
that
say,
the next
hey,
time.
what's your evidence for being an atheist? You
Yeah.
can say, okay, what I mean by evidence is a reason, da 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 da, and away you go. Because obviously, there are other reasons we could get into, but maybe we won't do that now, otherwise it becomes like
Yeah,
a much
exactly.
deeper conversation.
No, there are definitely, but these are the easiest because I'm trying to keep it simple. Remember, I'm dealing with people who are not able to really apply critical or rational or logical thinking. So I'm trying to take it easy and not strain it too much.
All right, let's see.
Especially the people who are watching. This is something that I always like to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's true as well. You've got to see if you can communicate such that the audience can understand as well. It helps if
another
if your
thing, what
interlocutors
people,
understand as well.
what I noticed about myself, that what I am doing is I'm taking a question, then I'm sort of going in my mind through different options of different answers that I might be giving, and then I am thinking, okay, if I do that, what is the impact going to be? What is he going to answer to what I am going to say? So I'm doing like 50 things in my brain, which is why sometimes it takes like half a second before I even answer, because I'm going through all the different options, thinking which is the best way.
Yeah, I think in some ways that can be good. I think in other ways, of course, it's got its pros and cons. In other ways, it's like you're trying to think a lot of moves ahead, and it's difficult to know all the moves unless you're very, very practiced and you know every single possible, coherent response to any.
Well, I try, yeah, exactly.
And that's a difficult one to do. I mean, obviously, if you can, that's great. I will have in my mind some idea of where the conversation is going generally, but I'm not necessarily always trying to think of in every moment what's the next thing. I'm going to go, here's my position, and if there's something that turns out that's problematic for me, then I can revisit that. So yeah, I think it depends on what the situation is.
I have been listening for many years for the evidence for the existence of gods. None has been brought forward.
Irrelevant.
Now, until
Irrelevant to what I'm saying.
Hamza, you need to learn to listen, okay?
But
If
don't
you
bring
ask
my
a question
point to the
and
table.
I am answering, you need to just pipe down a bit until I'm finished. Is that okay with you?
Go on.
Thank you. If you tell me there is a God and I'm saying, no, there isn't, then you can ask me, how come you don't believe it? And I can bring my case forward and tell you until
that's the reason,
you have provided.
That's it.
This is exactly what you're saying. I'm providing my reason, but I'm not calling it such. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not calling it evidence because in your mind maybe evidence is something stronger, and evidence can constitute reasons if it's rational, valid, and ideally sound reasons. Then that still counts as evidence.
And this is what I'm saying. I'm not using the word, but I'm saying I'm bringing my case forward, which is the same thing as bringing a reason.
Yeah, and I think like I say, I think the other thing is if you're uncomfortable with evidence, say to them, hey, what do you mean by evidence? Can reasons be evidence? And if they say no, then you also immediately you can hold them to the same standard. Then what do you consider evidence? Because the word evidence for something that doesn't exist isn't always as easy as something that does. Something that does exist will exhibit some, oftentimes physical evidence in some form. But if something doesn't exist, that's much harder to show the physical evidence. So it doesn't necessarily, in my mind at least, it's not symmetrical. I like the asymmetry, and I could be wrong about that. So I'm open to it being wrong. But I think demonstrating something doesn't exist with physical evidence is more difficult than demonstrating that something does exist with physical evidence.
The evidence that a God exists, there are no gods.
Okay.
That's how
Do you
easy it
believe-
is.
All right. Do you believe absence of evidence is evidence of absence?
There can be.
Very good answer. It can be, because that's the natural progression to something not existing. So of course it can be. Absolutely right on that one. When I heard you say that, I was like, that's brilliant. Very good.
Really?
Yes.
Like he's like, really? Well, how else would you get to a point of dismissing other claims when there's no evidence for them? Otherwise, you're going to have to take the absurd position that, hey, evidence of absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, in which case you have to accept every claim for which you haven't got evidence to dismiss it.
Then you go
That
to the
would be
absurdity
absurd.
that you mentioned.
Yeah, exactly.
But you can hear while I'm saying this, my brain. I mean, what you're hearing is me thinking aloud. Okay. So I was just waiting for him now because I was planning ahead and I was thinking, okay, oh fuck, what am I going to use? If he's now going to say, okay, give me an example. And I was already going through, churning through all the different possibilities. What do I know? What do I know? And then the only thing I could come up with was how do you spot an exoplanet? And this is exactly the evidence is there that there's a planet because of the absence of evidence of the light being reflected or deflected by the gravity of a planet. So if this is not there, then there must be a planet there. Otherwise, it would be there. So I'm trying to think. Okay, how do I explain this? And oh fuck! Luckily, he didn't ask. So,
but it's a good one for us to quickly discuss. I think just something that comes to mind. Again, I could be wrong about this. I'm not sure the exoplanet, because the exoplanet there's a deviation in the light. So when the planet passes in front of a star, they can measure the deviation. So that is evidence saying, hey, there's something passing in front of the star. And it's consistent, and it's this wavelength, or the light has been changed by this wavelength. So there is evidence of an exoplanet. That isn't like there is no evidence for that. But maybe, again, just thinking aloud, because it's a good thing to question, isn't it? Maybe something like you come upon a scene and somebody is dead and they've been shot in the head, but there's no murder weapon anywhere in sight, and so the claim is they committed suicide, but there appears to be no evidence that they committed suicide. I could be wrong. I'm speaking out loud. I'm like you, thinking out loud. There's no evidence they committed suicide, because in order to commit suicide, especially if you shoot yourself in the head, one would expect a firearm to be within a certain distance radius of you. And if we don't find that, if we find that the firearm was in fact dumped in a garbage can outside, 500 yards down the road, that would be evidence against you committing suicide, for example. So when you look in the variety, there's no evidence that suggests you committed suicide, because you would need, here's what evidence of committing suicide looks like. You'd have a firearm here. We see none of that evidence. From the absence of evidence, we can conclude that in fact you didn't commit suicide, because that wouldn't be possible to shoot yourself in the head and for a gun to be 500 yards down the road in a trash can. So it's more likely that some other
That's
method
much
was
easier
used
to
in order to
explain.
take
Yeah,
your life.
you're right. Yeah.
I'm just thinking out loud. That's
That's fine.
Could
Yeah.
be a constitution of absence of evidence pointing in a direction. Because here's what we expect. If there were evidence, there is none of that evidence, and so we can conclude X. Not with absolute certainty, but with a fair sense of reliability. So that might work. I mean, we can think more about it and see whether there's any concern with that. But that might be an example.
Based upon?
It's just it's empirical.
Right.
Nice one. Well, data.
Well, I thought it was a logical fallacy to make that claim.
Well, you're wrong.
I'm wrong. Am I wrong, Imran?
So thanks for coming on, Scott's phone. I'm trying to understand, because you
Welcome.
Say again?
He doesn't say anything. He keeps out of it.
No, I think it's a saying that people employ, right? This absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, or the other way around, sorry. But I think, as you quite rightly pointed out, it can be. And I think the example I used there might well be an example of that. And I think, obviously, if you think about it a little bit more.
Imran, when he says, Imran, am I right or wrong? Imran doesn't
He doesn't respond.
Go there at all.
But I mean, again, appealing to your buddy there, he could say yes or no, that's fine, but then he'd have to give reasons why he believes it's right or wrong.
Yeah, I would have said in his case, well, I'm not sure. I'll have to look into it. Cheers, let's go for the next one.
That's fine. Yeah, I'm cool with that. I'm
But
sure you are
he
too.
doesn't
If somebody
do
doesn't
that.
know something and saying,
He's
hey,
not
I don't know
capable.
about that, I'll look that up. I've got no problem with that.
And the first thing that Hamza asked you was, do you know what the first thing you ask is that what have you guys established? And it just showed you hadn't really listened to the beginning of the stream.
Didn't you say earlier on that you hadn't come on until
Yeah.
later? I'm sure you said that before he
Yes, I
says
did.
this. So he wasn't
Yeah.
paying attention that, yes, of course you didn't listen to the beginning of the stream because we were on the Gin and Tonic show that day. So, like, I do wonder sometimes if these guys are paying attention or whether and I think, whether it's a good or bad thing, I think that the brain does wander. If you're sitting listening in, sometimes your brain will wander. And I think that's probably what happened in this case.
When we were establishing what we were trying to establish. And so really this is why this conversation has not been fruitful at all. I mean, what you're really trying to demonstrate is you feel that there's no evidence for God, and therefore you don't have to believe in him. That's entirely your prerogative. Now, what's happening here is actually you're not dealing with anything that we've raised at all. And so I don't understand the reason for coming on if you haven't actually heard what we put forward. And I don't find anything that you've said so far compelling at all. I mean, you're conflating belief in a divine being, a creator, with religions, and they don't necessarily have to coexist. You can believe in a God without believing in any specific religion. And in this stream, we've specifically left religions out of this. We can talk about the conceptual analysis of whatever God you think that someone may believe in, or I think that someone may believe in, but that's a different topic. Having different concepts of God doesn't negate the existence of God in the first place. Just like having different concepts of gravity doesn't negate the existence of gravity.
Okay, but the point that Hamza is making around this is that, and especially because he started with the evolution one, right? That was his point with you. He didn't even do the belief thing with you. He went straight to evolution in the beginning, if memory serves correct. In which case he got you, and he wanted to thank you for saying, hey, evolution doesn't disprove a God. But again,
So it's been fruitful, I think, yeah.
yeah, but again, we need to reiterate, when an atheist comes to a theist and says, hey, evolution disproves a God, what they are referring to is that theist's particular God. Because I think if you ask any thoughtful atheist, do you mean any possible God? And if they said yes by mistake, you could say, what about a deist God? And if they were thoughtful, they go, okay, maybe it doesn't disprove that. But again, I think if these guys are going to be charitable, then when an atheist says, hey, evolution disproves your God, I think the intellectual onus is on them to say, hey, atheist, whoever you are, what do you mean by God? Do you mean my God? Do you mean all gods? What God are you talking about? They should ask the question. Because in the atheist mind, they may not be saying, hey, it disproves Allah. They'll just say it disproves God. Because they don't normally say a God. When I've heard atheists, they'll say evolution disproves a God, and they'll be speaking to a particular theist. And so in their mind, maybe they're not articulate themselves fully, but they're specifically talking about that theist's God. But I think it's incumbent, like I say, on the particular theist to say, hey, do you mean my God, or are you just talking about a God in general, or gods, or what do you mean?
Well, the thing is that if they know that I come in late, they could just go and say, listen, we're discussing 3 points, 1, 2, 3, and then let me answer the question. But what happened is that Hamza went for evolution. Okay, that's cool. But then for Imran to go and say, and now he starts wafting for half an hour, to say, well, it's not truthful because I don't know the whole topic and I didn't go there from the beginning, and I'm conflating different things which I'm not really doing. This is like disingenuous. I don't understand why he would do that. It shows me that he doesn't have the mind, he doesn't have the the presence of mind to go and understand the entire situation. He's looking at a tiny segment here and thinking, well, why isn't he answering the questions? Well, I've given you the reason why. Why can't you just repeat them? And then why would he say, I am conflating religion, which is just the representation of gods, with gods? I mean, you cannot... If you make a claim about a god, you cannot at that moment totally ignore religion, because the religion is linked to that one specific god. And to say that I'm conflating this and I'm not answering and I'm not doing and I don't understand what he was saying, really. I was sitting there thinking, what is he on about? But then just when I thought, okay, now he's going to stop and then he's going to let me answer, he carries on talking. And opens the next point. And I thought, okay, well, how do I remember now this part that I need to answer something here when he's now opening a new one? And I thought, okay, let me just keep quiet and see what happens. But then he goes on and on and on and on.
Yeah,
So,
I think, and in this case with Imran, I think you do need to interrupt and say, hey, Imran, you've brought up 3 points. Let me interrupt you now because you're now going on to another point. So if you make 3 points, do you want me to, start to write them down and then you're going to give me 5 minutes to respond to them? Let's do a point by point sort of thing. Otherwise, it's like a shotgun effect.
yeah, I
But
learned.
do
That's
agree
why
with you,
the next
right?
time I did exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I do agree with you in the sense that Imran could easily have said, okay, stop spamming. Obviously, we're talking about answering atheists here. You're an atheist, you've come on. Here's the 3 points. Hamza's given you one, because obviously Hamza did give you one. That was the very first thing that he went. The other thing is talking about this beliefs thing, and the other thing is about, the argument, of evil, for example, and I've done X, Y, and Z. And you can frame it up, at least broadly speaking, in 30 seconds. And then,
And the
main
title
points.
did not give me any information that this was about 3 questions.
No, it didn't. That's true. But you are an atheist. Presumably they know that. And so it's a discussion and you've come on to have a discussion. You're an atheist. You're going to represent yourself, not all atheists. And
Exactly.
they're talking to atheists. Here you are. And it takes, like I say, 30 seconds, maybe a minute to summarize the main points, and then you can respond to them.
Today we
I don't
have a
think it's
topic
big deal
which is
to
this
do
and
that.
this. Yeah.
It would
Funny.
still be the same. That's a separate argument from the existence of the creator in the first place. So, I mean, as an atheist, one of the things that I assume that you do is you assert the fact that there is no God. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So the question that Hamza's asking you is, what do you base this assertion upon? So one thing is to say, the only things that I accept are those things that I can empirically verify. That would be one position.
Okay, so here he makes a mistake, right? And this is something for all of us to remember and learn. If you ask a person a question, then stop talking and let the person answer. If you ask a question and then you go into a long clarifying rant, or you ask a second follow-up question, then it becomes more complicated. Then the other person needs a lot more time to be able to answer it. And now in their brain they go, okay, what was the first question? What was the second? And the brain remembers normally the last thing that was said, because it's the thing that's that's most sticky in your mind, so to speak. So it's a lesson for all of us, and I think if he ever watches this, for him as well. Ask a question, then keep quiet, or formulate the question in your mind and then articulate it and then keep quiet, however you want to do it. But if you do this, it expands it out, and now you have 2 questions, or a question plus a long clarifying statement, and in that statement there'll be other points that you, as Stop Spamming, might want to answer, and then the original question kind of gets lost a little bit.
And don't do what he's doing, which is even worse. That is to ask a question and then answer it yourself and say, but this is surely going to be your answer.
Yeah, exactly.
There may be other positions why you may come to this. So do you how do you assert, what's your justification for asserting that there is no
I've just said this.
there is no creator?
Should I repeat this, what I just
Yeah, you have said it, right? Over the last 50,000 years, nothing's been demonstrated, right? Or words to that effect.
said?
Please.
Okay. If somebody comes to me and says there is a God, and then has nothing to substantiate that with, and there's no evidence to show that there is a God, I can safely say, well, until there is evidence for the existence of a God, there is no God. So I'm saying until somebody comes up with this, there's no God.
Okay, great. So now we have a bit of a criteria. You require evidence, yeah? So
Correct.
the next question that would come to mind for me is, okay, what evidence would suffice you? What evidence would suffice you as being evidenced enough to convince you that a God exists?
No, this is a stupid question. There's 2 different answers.
Sorry?
This is actually it's a really stupid question, because if you are making a claim and say, I have a Ferrari at home, and then I say, well, actually, I don't believe you, how can you then tell me I need to tell you what the evidence is that you need to provide if I don't know what a Ferrari is? This is totally crazy. He makes a claim of something that he doesn't define, which doesn't exist, which is nobody has ever seen it, nobody's ever experienced anything like it, nobody knows what it is, and then he tells me that I need to say what the evidence is that would satisfy me. And this is a stupid question. So I'm saying, okay, look, there's 2 ways of answering this, and one is the I don't know, conceptual one, and the other one is the practical one. Those are the only 2 ways that you
Okay,
can
but-
go about
okay.
it. But it's a stupid question.
Okay, but why not give those then? Because I think
I do.
Okay, because I think if I understand, I think I understand what you're saying in the sense of like you don't know what this being is, but I guess the question is, and I do think for all of us as atheists, I think it's worth us thinking about it, if not right now in this moment when you and I are speaking, certainly to ponder this, which is if there is this supreme being that created the universe, what would we, or what, as you say, what would we hypothetically accept as potentially evidence? And so for me, maybe it's not the best criteria, but I've thought about it. So if this God was going to, there's many different things, but if this God was going to, if part of this God was the idea that he's going to communicate with me, then what I would expect, ideally evidence for me would be a direct communication. Then you cut out any possible, or you have the best chance at least of the message coming as clearly as possible. Given that I'm a fallible human being, there's still margin for error, which again one has to question, because if you wanted to send a perfect message, then you need a perfect transmitter and a perfect receiver, because if either one of those are imperfect, then there's either a chance or it's guaranteed that some part of the message will be lost. So that would be the best way. But even if it wasn't that, and every person had that same message, and I spoke to somebody in a different language, and they said, I've got that exact same message. Wow, that's incredible. And also, part of that was, hey, you may not believe this, and so I'm going to make a prediction, or I'm going to say this, or I'm going to say that with such fine precision that would be stupendous for human beings. That would be one sort of potential evidence. Another is my example with the obelisk, set in the middle of Mecca, that is unbreakable, that is, essentially like an objective version of a god, like an object version of a god. It can't be destroyed. It sits there. When you touch this, it comes up in your own language. You can read it. You can ask any question in your mind. The moment you touch this magic obelisk, it gives you the answer, the direct answer. So this isn't God speaking to you, but it's going through this obelisk again, avoiding any fallibility. So it's basically just like looking in a mirror, looking on this thing, and whatever answer, and it happens in every single language. That would, for me, would be pretty extraordinary if that could be the case, and I could verify it, and the person in the other language could do that as well. We could verify it. So some things like that. Those are some examples. I mean, you could come up with your own
This
ones.
could be technology.
You could come up with them, but I guess what I'm saying is,
okay, this is why I come up with different examples.
And if you don't like the physical evidence, then obviously reason. So if they could give me a knockdown argument, that would move me towards their position. There was some philosophical argument that on investigation by the smartest humans on the planet could not be refuted. It was just a knockdown. Yeah. It was both valid and sound, and it was in their favor. That would move me towards them. It may not completely convince me, but it would certainly be evidence in favor of their position, and it may well be strong evidence. So I think it's incumbent on us to think about what could it be. The other one, like you said, is, hey, well, if God is all-knowing and he knows me, then he would know what would convince me. That's the Delahanty sort of response. So one can go with that. I think it just lacks a little bit of punch almost, because for them it doesn't feel like you've answered the question. I think if you do answer it in a way, maybe not my answers, but whatever your thought up answers are, it gets the listeners to go, okay, so he has got criteria.
I did. This is exactly what I did, yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, let's hear it now. So, sorry, a bit of a waffle there for me.
And so two different possibilities for that. One is that I can say, I don't know what a God is. So if a God makes claims as to the character of this God, then I can say, well, if a God is, I don't know, just say all-powerful, then it can provide the evidence. If it's all-knowing, it should know what evidence to provide. And if it's all-merciful, it should have the mercy to provide this evidence. I cannot know what this God can produce because I have never met any God, so I cannot determine what the capabilities of a God are.
Okay, that's not a bad answer. And by the way, here's just a little post. So it's our pleasure, and I'm an ex-Arabic speaker, ex-Muslim Salafi, and still hiding. Think these guys can never face us. Thank you, guys. Well, it's our pleasure, and stay safe, and keep thinking critically, and hopefully it works out for you in some way. But if we can help, and obviously look at all the ex-Muslim channels as well, and hopefully, we know that there's many of you out there, and some of you can't do it for fear of, extreme consequences. So we certainly acknowledge that, and keep doing what you're doing.
Where were you this afternoon when I thought of a question, And this had something to do with two different Arabic words, and I thought, Jesus, where do I find somebody now who can verify this in Arabic?
Well,
Now
maybe
you are
can-
here, but now I forgot the question.
But maybe put a contact email in, Stops, or I'll put a contact email in for this gentleman who's the ex-Arabic speaker here, and you can always get in contact
So
with
he's
us.
ex-Muslim, still Arabic speaker.
Still Arabic, yeah. So there's my Gmail account. So if you want to, send me an email, I can always pass it on to Stops, so we can keep in contact. So thanks for listening, and hope
Yep.
you enjoy the rest of the
And
show.
good luck.
Yeah.
The other way of doing it is saying to make a claim that would satisfy me. And that is, for example, if I would have a Quran that is updated on a daily basis in every language on this planet, so that it is ingrained in my brain, so that I don't need a book in a human language, which is primitive and wrong, and I would find things that are actually correct, that would go a long way.
Okay, so there's two things that you've raised.
Okay, so good. Okay, so you've said it there. I did a bit of the waffle in the beginning there, and you've kind of done a nice short version of what, potentially some things that would move you in that direction. Okay, great. So that at least has answered the question as to what it might be.
There. So the first thing that you've raised is that you've never met a God, so you wouldn't know, whatever evidence. So what you've done in that first part is you've taken.
No. That is, oh my God, that's a terrible misrepresentation. But you're right. He's only remembered the last three words that I said. This is not what I was talking about. I said at the beginning, nobody knows. This is the most important thing, that there is nothing that anybody can tell me what this God is capable of. This is the point.
Yeah. Okay.
You've taken the onus of establishing whether a God exists away from us in our discussion, and you've placed it on God Himself. Or
Okay, but what's wrong with that?
Yeah, that's exactly the point.
Again, let's just follow the logic here. If God exists, He's all good, and He wants us to know about Him, then the onus is on Him to provide good reasons and evidence for us to accept Him. And obviously, what we're not going to accept is faith-based claims, the absence of good reasons and evidence. That's an unreliable method. Anybody can claim faith on any proposition, and it's essentially unfalsifiable, or unreliable at least. So that's not a good thing. So yes, of course, the onus is on God, or His messengers, or His words, or whatever the case may be. Or on you guys to some degree, because you believe it. So the question that Stops and I are asking is, why do you guys believe what you believe? And that's where you provide, you can ask us what would be evidence, and Stops has answered, and I would answer similar sort of things as I have. But now you're making the claim, hey, this is the way the world is, and we want to know why you believe that.
God, obviously, we don't believe God has a gender, but God Himself. So that's one thing that you've done. The second thing that you've done is you've asked for something to happen, which is almost like the Matrix equivalent of downloading something into your brain.
Yes.
Yeah. On a daily basis, you're requiring. So let's have a look at both of these things. Yeah. So the first thing that you've said is that God necessarily has to provide evidence to you, and you don't know what this evidence would look like. Okay. So how, in what position? So the question then comes is, okay, would you be in a position to recognize that evidence? And if you're not in a position to recognize that evidence, then how would you know if the evidence was there or not? How are you then arriving at a conclusion?
Thick or what? I just given you this. How could this is like 30 seconds ago. I've told you exactly the answer to this. I've literally told you, if a God has all the power he should be able to, if he knows everything, then he knows what persuade me. I told you this.
Yeah, and he's putting forward the hypothetical. What if you couldn't establish this? Okay, well then whose fault is that? If you are honestly trying to do it to the best of your ability, and you are unable to do it, and yet the claim is that the God wants to do this for you, then you are not responsible for that. It's like a teacher trying to communicate with a student, if we use their sort of analogy, and the student and the teacher is speaking in a high level computational mathematics, and the student only understands basic arithmetic. And the teacher says, hey, but I actually want you to understand it. And the student is going, well, hey, I don't understand it. Who's responsible for that? It's clearly not the student, is it?
and I would be able to see it, then this God would know what kind of evidence would be sufficient for me to convince me.
So you're missing the question that I'm asking, brother. So what
No, you're missing my answer. I understand your question. I understand. Let me rephrase your question. Let me repeat your question, okay? So that we understand the same thing. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. What you are asking is, if I ask a God for evidence where I don't know what the evidence is, if that evidence were to be provided to me, would I automatically be in a position to actually identify it as such? Is that your question?
Yes. Let's go with that. So let me phrase it slightly in how I want it. So
Why doesn't he
if you
just
say that
this is
you're
the way-
unable to recognize
Well, yeah, I think he wants to phrase it his way, and that is what it is.
But
evidence,
he's
that God
phrased it, I've rephrased it, I've repeated it. This is his question, and he still goes on about it. I don't get it. And who's this Kafai? That's Matt Delanty's narrative evidence. I don't know. I don't look at what Matt Delanty does. I used to follow what he did on what was it, ACA or something, but then it got a bit tedious and it got a bit too aggro, so I just left it. And his talks about debates and that I wasn't all that interested in, so I don't know what he says. This is what I think. All right, I'm not. I don't think that I'm repeating anything that anybody else has said. This is what I think. So yeah.
Then if the evidence were given, how would you recognize it as such?
I don't know. I don't know the evidence. I'm taking now for case number A. I made two cases, A and B. So in case number A, I wouldn't know, because I would have to rely on the God to bring something that would be convincing for me, where he or it or whatever would know that it is convincing for me.
Okay.
I mean, another way one could phrase that is I'd use my rational faculties to investigate whatever it is that is being brought to me, to see if I can establish to the best of my ability whether it's something that A is an extraordinary thing or whatever the case may be, so that I can differentiate between the two. What else am I going to use? Presumably that's what in your worldview, Mr. Muslim, God has given me. So that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to use the supposed gifts that God has given us, even though these gifts are are buggy. They're not as good as they could be, which is maybe we'll still get onto that later on. I don't know. So that's one way you could answer, but you've done a good enough job there as well. With
No,
that, so.
but the thing is, he doesn't understand that I said my premise was all-knowing. So if this God has all knowledge, it should know if I understand it or not, and should adjust it automatically without having to go into a conversation with me. Did you understand it? No, I didn't. Please do something better. It should already know this.
Yeah, that's true. The God would know that what he would need, but his question is, how would you differentiate evidence from not good evidence? And presumably you're going to use your rational faculties, probably the scientific method if it's empirical evidence, but certainly your rational faculties and your ability to reason. That's what you're going to use. That's the tools that you're going to employ. That's what he's asking. How would you do this? And you would use those you'd use those tools to do this to the best of your ability.
And I'm jumping that. I'm saying I don't have to, because this God would already know what is compelling and would provide it in a way that I wouldn't have to do anything. I mean, you have to logically think what this...
You'd still have to do something. I mean, you couldn't be in a vegetative state, right? So you'd still have to employ your rational faculties. But and I know you're jumping over, but then strictly speaking, you're not answering the question that he asked. Now, you could say, hey, well, that's a silly question, or I don't want to answer it. But if you're going to jump the question, then at least...
No, I didn't jump the question. No. Oh, my God. I am jumping the contents of his question, because he's thinking, how would I know? And I'm saying I would not have to know, because the God would know if it has the knowledge, because it would know whether I know or not know. So if I do not know, the case doesn't work. The whole concept is broken. Then it's not a God. So I'm saying I do not have to know this. The God has to know.
No, okay, but hang on a moment. Okay, but hang on. There's two things here. One is that the God knows. The other thing is that whether you can know. And his question is not about whether the God knows. His question is about whether you know. And
exactly.
I think and so to my
That's
ear at
stupid.
least, there must be some way for you to know. Whether God knows or not, or knows how you would be convinced is one thing.
No, Rob, you're going down the same. Okay, then I'm not making myself clear. I'm saying if I get information X, that information X is being given to me in some way. I don't know which way. I'm not fussy. It doesn't matter. If I get this information is custom made for me because this information giver would know what information I can understand using the faculties I have been provided with by this very being, and therefore whatever I am being provided with must be fitting exactly to what I can process, because this being created me and is now giving me the information which it knows I can process. Otherwise, it's futile.
Okay, but there again, you're saying that it knows you can process. The question isn't that it knows. The question is, how do you know? Let me phrase it differently and see if this makes a difference. Let's say that this being gave you the information that it knows you could process. How would you differentiate that from something else giving you information, and you going, well, that information isn't correct? How would you establish the difference? So if God gave you something that He knew you could answer, and you then acquired information from another source, how would you establish what would you then use to establish the difference? I guess is the way to ask the question.
Okay, but this is impossible because it's about evidence regarding the existence of this being, this God.
Okay, so an example. Let me see if I can give an example. So if God says to you, okay,
I
stop
understand
standing.
your example. I don't need an example. I understand what you're saying. If I get the information from a God, okay, that's one thing. But what if somebody else gives me the information, and how would I be able
so
to
what are you gonna
differentiate this
do?
between one and the other?
What are you going to bring to bear to as your tools, whatever tools those are, to look at those two different bits of information and establish one came from the God and one didn't?
No. Okay. One would be information that I can understand, process, that makes sense, is reasonable, rational, logical, consistent. The other one wouldn't be, because I would then, if it were not the case, then I would use my faculties. So of course, yes. So the one is, I don't know how I can say this. If I have a hand and I put another hand on top of it, it fits, it matches, it is perfectly covering one the other. If it were a different size, I would immediately know that I can reject it because I know it's not my hand.
How do you do that? What are you bringing to bear to say that it's not your hand?
No, it's intuitive. It's there. It's built into the system. It is like, what am I doing if I look at my hand? I'm just looking at it. There's nothing big going on in my head. I'm just looking and I'm seeing, one is matching the other. If I put them together like this, then I can see, they're matching, the size is the same, and one is the same as the other. If this information were to come from a God, I should be able to know immediately that this is coming from this God, because only a God will be able to provide this kind of information on this level that I immediately understand it without even having to think about it.
I don't know how you could understand something without thinking about it. But you said a good thing, right? You did add the word intuition. That could be another tool, right? You could use the word intuition. That would be another tool. But those are the tools. I think, that's why we're going down this route, because I think that's the question he's asking you. How can you differentiate? And you've sort of roundaboutly said that you're using rational faculties, but you've also added intuition, which I'm fine with, by the way. But those are the answers that I think he's looking for.
Okay.
And you didn't seem to provide that. Maybe because
I wasn't thinking along those lines at all. This is true.
Yeah.
This is why I'm saying I skipped over that, because for me it was obvious that there could only be information from a God that would match exactly my expectation.
Okay, so Pierre seems to be sort of also going down your line. God knows what Stops would accept as evidence, so he could provide him one exactly in his way. It does not matter what it is. Stops is right. But Pierre,
yes,
again,
that's exactly it. Yeah.
But in order for it does matter. In order for him to accept it as evidence, something needs to happen. It's not like he's a robot that you press a button and everything just fires up, and he's not in control of anything. If he's presented with, quote, evidence or information, something from stops needs to happen, and that's essentially what as I understand it, that's what Imran is asking him. It's not like suddenly the light pings on and stops is not in control. It's just like, yeah, that's right. He's doing something. And when he explained with the hand, he was explaining what he's doing with the hand. He talked about intuition, and in a roundabout way, he talked about his faculties. He's observing. He's making sense of it. Hey, one hand on top of the other. There's certain things that are going on. That's what Imran is actually asking. So
yeah, we're talking about different things, and I didn't understand what he was asking, because for me this was irrelevant, because this is what I'm saying. The contents of that I skipped over because for me it was obvious. So
that's cool, and I think this is also good for us. It's easy as an armchair people afterwards to talk about it. But I think it's useful to do that. So if that question came up again, either you could present those things that you would use, or explain why you're sort of going past that, if you like. But at least we've got something. You could use your intuition, you could use your reason. Those would be two sort of core things that you would use to differentiate from, God things, unless you were going to say, hey, he's just going to download it into my brain. I'm literally going to be like a zombie, and suddenly the light pings on. It's like it goes on, and I automatically go, it's right. Somebody asks, well, how do you know it's right? It's just right because God, zinged it into my brain. But the question is still him zinging it in and somebody else zinging it in. There's some process that happens there. But cool, okay, that's fine. I think it's all good.
Yeah.
I mean, when we do my one tomorrow, or whenever we do my one, there'll be things that you can point out, and I think that's useful for all of us, really. Cool. Let's see.
Okay. So I would say to you and this is not about you as an individual. We're talking, and this is usually what happens. It becomes an egocentric thing.
Okay, I'll take it as that. Yeah.
Sure. The idea is actually we're talking about a humanity. So for us, it's not my position is not that you would be able to. The evidence should be given to you as if you individually were someone who's deserving of having your own specific evidence that would satisfy you, because then that would apply to everyone. So you.
Okay, but what's wrong with that, though? What's wrong with that? If God himself wants us to know, and the book is either unclear or not complete or is unsatisfactory, and we all want to know whether this God exists, and he wants us to know that he exists, then the obligation is on him, because we can't do any more than we can do. He can do a lot more. He has the capability. So yes, he could provide individual evidence to every person who asks for it. There's nothing that rules that out. Either he's unwilling or he's unable. Which is it?
correct.
You want the thing downloaded into your brain. Someone else might want the sky to open and a ladder to come down, and somebody to come down with a book. Another person might want to turn into a frog and then back into a human. So this is a really farcical way of trying to...
Why is it farcical? Okay, you see, this is the other thing that we just need to pay attention to with the Muslim apologist. They make claims, and of course their gullible audience will say, yeah, that's amazing. They make a claim, but they never justify it. And the thing that's like burnt into my brain is, what's the argument for that? You've made a claim that this is farcical. What's the argument for that?
To ask for evidence as an individual. What the point should be that there should be an objective way, as much as possible, that we could establish whether something is, whether something like a creator exists or not. Is that reasonable?
Okay. If you go and you say there is a God, and this God would download the information into every person the same way, that there would be one unified message that everybody would understand, that everybody would know what this is about, then this would make a lot of sense. Because then we would not need books, would not need this. So this is not a single thing. This is not something that I would want. This is the knowledge that a God should have about the creation it created. So I'm taking me as just as a token.
I understand. So the problem, there is a problem intrinsic in the method that you're asking for, which is the downloading method. There's a problem, and I'll come to that in a second, but that's the second.
Okay, I definitely want to hear what that problem is, though.
Second part of your thing that you've raised. I'm trying to deal with the first part. So the first part of it is actually how am I going to, and now this is an interaction between you and me as opposed to the creator. So if I believe, and this is a belief based upon, and the word belief for Muslims is slightly different from just a faith without evidence. I'm sure you're aware of that anyway. But if I were to say that evidence of a creator communicating with human beings is sufficient in my eyes. You would say, okay, show me what that evidence is, and I could talk about a few things to say this is these are the many things that would lead me to this conclusion, and that might mean explaining the origin of the universe, for example, explaining things like the argument from freedom, i.e., free will or free thought, actually having the ability to think in a free way, and other things like morality. I'm sure you said you've been doing this for decades. You know a lot of these the things that are put forward, and then looking at phenomena like, for example, the fact that in every society, virtually, in every people separated by time, by language, by geography, people have come forward to say that a creator is communicating, and this is what the communication has been.
I don't think he realizes that he's shooting himself in the foot very badly here, because people over time have claimed creators or whatever the case is, and many times they've differed on what a creator is. It's not all powerful, it's either within the universe or whatever. Their definition of a creator is a specific one, somebody else's definition of a creator is a specific one, and they're mutually contradictory. All that tells us is that human beings want answers, and when they don't have one, they create answers that are certainly not well evidenced, but maybe are sufficient to allow them to sleep at night. That's all it seems to be telling me. But that's not a good argument in favor of your position. And again, they're not going to their particular creator. They're just talking about creators. Hey, all these humans around the world have had an idea of a creator. That must be something special. Well, what's special about it? I think I've just said one of the reasons that it can be, quote, special is that humans are fallible, want answers, and then they create these ideas.
And I'm waiting for him to give me half a millisecond, because I wanted to tell him, look, if I go and I see what a God claims it is in the Quran, for example, then I have a certain picture, I have a certain expectation, I have a certain, sort of, I don't know, thing in my head what things should look like. And then, yet, if I go into reality, that's not what I see. So there's a huge disconnect, where if there were one God, one message, one everything, and only one creator, then it should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But it's not like that. It's exactly what you are saying, Rob, is that everything is different. We have different gods with different claims, with different personalities, characters, attributes. Everything is different. Different books, which are totally contradictory to one another, which does not substantiate the claim in any way that there is only one single creator.
Yeah. And I think the other
That's what I wanted to tell
him, but with each interlocutor, like Imran, he goes on a sort of a long monologue, and I think, in you being very polite here, but I do think that in this case, it's a case of interrupting. So, hey, you're making multiple points. Let's go with one thing. Or if you're making a general point, can you make the general point first? Because otherwise, you're going into this long thing. You're bringing up different things. I do not then get a chance to respond to each one of the sub-points that is pointing to your main point. So start with the main point, and let's talk about that. If you need to bring in sub-points, do that afterwards. Because I can do the same thing. You can shotgun out, 5 or 6 different things and then not give the person a chance to respond to all of them. Or you might not remember every single one of them because you're trying to, follow the conversation. So I think that's one thing that Imran can certainly improve on. Stick on one thing, make a statement, then let somebody respond to it. Otherwise, you go into this long, it's almost like a preach. It feels like preaching.
Exactly. That's what I tell him. But remember, I'm walking on eggshells, right?
Mm.
And in that, you find a commonality. I.e., there's an underlying theme. That
You can hear our taking breath.
It doesn't mean that what we have now, for example, in the multiple different concepts of God, this is that same thing. I'm talking about in the original message, there is an underlying consistency.
What is he talking about? What original message? This sounds like cherry picking to me. Let's find something that's common and ignore all the differences as if that's going to make my point. No, that's called cherry picking. Choosing the parts that suit you and ignoring the things that contradict your argument. No, that's not a good way of doing things.
And these are not people who are linked in terms of they're not living next to each other, they're not sort of speaking the same language or from the same ethnicity. This is geographically spread out worldwide. Ethnically spread out worldwide. The people have come with this sort of message from all types of people, and we can.
What's this message that a God exists?
No,
their own personal version of a God.
This is the Islam thing where all the messengers came with the same messages, 124,000 of them, to every corner of the earth with the same message. There is only one God. This is the Islamic
Well,
message.
that's clearly false, right? Because
Yes, of course it
as
is.
we can see in
Yeah.
different cultures, there's multiple gods. So either that these
Exactly.
messengers haven't arrived yet, or if they were, there's no record of them, and they obviously had no impact there. But we can certainly say that that seems to be evidence to the contrary of that claim.
No, but they corrupted it.
No, well, then the claim is unfalsifiable. Then
Yeah.
it's of no interest. Then the person is saying nothing of interest. There's nothing of substance to be
Yes.
said there. It's just
Exactly.
a vacuous claim.
Analyze whatever this might be. So those are the things that I would say that this can, if we analyze.
Rob,
I'm
just
giving you the outline here.
can you just stop for a minute? I'm seeing the same idiotic message over and over again in the chat from this cafe or whatever.
Well,
No, it is not a straw man. If a God tells me I want you to worship me, I need to know who the fuck this God is. Does it exist? This is not a straw man. A straw man is if you are addressing something that the other guy did not tell you. That is what a straw man is, addressing something different than the original discussion was about. You need to learn these things. You can't
can
just
always
go
go on.
and do things like that.
yeah, we can. If we finish in time, we can always go on Discord, and Cafe is welcome to come on there and have a
He's
discussion.
welcome to come on here. There's only another 5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, we could finish this and he can come on.
10
I just want to make sure that we finish cleanly so that we
Yeah.
keep it as a part, and then, because otherwise it'll go off in a different direction. So we could always do that, but then I want to have a pause so that I can edit that part out or make it into a second video, because I want to focus part 3 on simply the review and critique
Okay,
of
yeah.
this stream. Yeah.
Cool.
And if we analyze here specifically, these amount to evidence for the existence of a creator. Now, I haven't gone into those arguments.
No. This is, you see, he's making claim after claim after claim, but he doesn't give me the time to go and respond to them. And then, of course, it's exactly what you are saying. After he's made 5 or 6 claims, you don't remember the first. Can anybody tell me what he said in the beginning, what this was about? I can't.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, though. There's been a long monologue here. So, at this stage, it's not easy to remember the original thing. But like you say, if the claim is that all these messages and all, there's this underlying, quote, theme, or whatever you want to call it, that is the same across cultures and across times and whatever it is, what is this theme? And what about the evidence that contradicts that? Are you going to ignore that?
Individually, but I think that would be sufficient. Now, just before you respond to that, I want to talk about your second.
Okay, yeah, I'm definitely gonna call out his thing here, and it's easy as again for us when we're watching here, but here we needed to step in. I know you're walking on eggshells, but now this is a monologue. If we have to go back and time it, this is a number of minutes, and there's a lot of information that has been asserted here that hasn't been demonstrated, and he hasn't at all, I think, answered or done the original question, which is the one that I asked. Now, I don't remember exactly what the specific part was, but I remember saying, well, I'm interested to hear him answer that particular question. Let's see if he does it now, because now he's going on to another point.
Because I think the second point is that it detracts from you an ability that we think is that would be important in the reason for having human beings on the earth. So we understand that the earth is created as a place for testing, and necessarily for testing you require agency, i.e. the ability to make moral choices, choose between right and wrong. And if you're going to choose between right and wrong, you need free will. Now, if you have...
Okay, this is a completely separate point that he's going on to now.
Yeah.
This is not great in the sense of being like a host of this thing and bringing up a long thing and not answering the assertion that you originally made, that I was interested in. Even I now don't remember the specific words of that. We'd have to rewind it to see what that was.
Something that's downloaded into you like the Matrix, the choice element is removed.
No, that is complete. Okay, let's let him finish here. That's complete nonsense.
So that would be something that isn't required. That would be something that would be detrimental to the initial plan of having the Earth here in the first place.
Hamza nods.
So I know that's a bit of a long explanation.
Okay, but it's not an explanation. It's an assertion, and it doesn't follow. And what's the argument for that? And of course, we've got heaven ready when you're ready to refute that argument. Your heaven is a place where people have got free will. There's only good things there, and that place, quote unquote, in your world exists. So it's not true to say that you can't have stuff downloaded and violates your free will. That's a non sequitur. One does not follow from the other. And if you want to make an argument, please do make an argument. Don't just make an assertion. But as you can see, that's what he's very good at, is making assertions and never backing them up. And that's why it's important, especially with somebody like this. Once you see the pattern that certain apologists run, you have to interrupt the pattern. Otherwise, the pattern just runs, and it runs in their favor, of course. So he's done a long monologue, made multiple assertions, and at no point has he backed them up with anything substantial. And then he's going to pass it over to you to try and refute his assertions. By the way, Sabur does this as well. So this tactic is, hey, I'm going to make a claim. I want you to refute it. No, that's a shifting of the goalposts. You make a claim, tell me why you think it's the case, and then we can have that discussion. You don't make a claim and then say to me, disprove it. I can say that to them. Hey, I believe, the pink unicorn exists on Mars. I want you to refute
Show me that it doesn't, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're not going to accept, they're going to laugh about it, but they're doing the same. The concept is the same. I'm going to make these assertions, and then I'm going to let you try and, I'm not going to back them up. I'm just going to ask you to try and challenge them.
I apologize. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you gave me a whole lot of claims. So it's very difficult to respond to each one individually now.
Yeah.
Let me just take the last one. I don't understand, I must admit. How you get from one to the other, I don't understand that.
Well, if everybody's programmed by God, then there's no free will, because everyone's like robots.
Okay, even Hamza's not paying attention. Imran never said programmed. He said just downloaded with the information that God, the message that God wants them to have. That's not programmed. That's giving them what God actually wants them to have. They can still have free will, as heaven proves.
No, that's not what programming is. If I give somebody the freedom, if I am not omniscient, if I don't have all knowledge, I can test something. I wouldn't need to test it because I know the outcome. If I'm a good programmer, I don't need to test things. Only if I'm an incompetent and infallible or fallible human being, I need to test things. If I'm infallible and know everything, I don't need to test it. This item I am producing doesn't need to be tested if it is doing what it's supposed to be doing, which is distinguishing between good and bad, because I don't want it to do wrong things. I don't want it to do bad things. If I'm going to go and punish somebody for doing something bad, and then I instill in them the ability to do something bad, and then still get them to do something bad, and then punish them for what they are doing bad, then I am punishing them for my own incompetence.
Okay,
this is where the problem is.
Let me give you an example of what I meant. If God downloaded into your brain as a matrix not to drink alcohol, would you drink alcohol?
Hang on, how can I? That doesn't work. You need to be logical.
What were you thinking at this moment?
I was thinking there's different options here. Because if I say yes, then I can't remember what I was thinking. Because if I say would, if I cannot say, okay, I thought, let me just say yes. But then I thought, hey, but I can't do that. Because if I say yes, then he's going to immediately jump at me and saying, well, you can't go and do something that your God says you shouldn't be doing. So I need to go and first give my reasoning and first establish a base, what I'm looking at as a reasoning level before I say no, before I say yes. Would you drink alcohol? Yes, I would. I wouldn't care what God did me. The thing is, I did not want to go to the Euthyphro dilemma because he does not understand it. So I wanted to go in a very simple, very rational way and explain it to him.
Okay, cool. Because again, there's certain presuppositions in there. If God downloaded it to your brain, would you do it? Well, you still have the free will to do it. That's the important part here. It's not like you can't do it. But there's presuppositions, there's hidden presuppositions there. You'd have to establish that you knew this was a God, and even more importantly almost, that you knew that this was an omnibenevolent God. Because if you can't establish that point, then whatever he's communicating to you, let's assume that he could communicate it in a way that it reaches you almost 100%, let's say, because you're fallible, so it can never be 100%, because there's always a chance you can misunderstand something. Unless he created you perfect, then the transmission would be perfect. Perfect transmitter to a perfect receiver with a perfect message in between. But if any one of those three components are less than perfect, then obviously there's a probability that the message won't be perfectly transmitted. But let's assume that he could transmit the message to you in some way that was a high level of probability. You've got to establish that it's all good. And so you would question and go, okay, how do I know it? But let's assume that it was all good. You could go, okay, that's good, but maybe you have the feeling that you want to do it anyway to test it out, because human perception or human intuition is, if you think about it, when you're a child, when you tell a child not to do something, oftentimes they'll do it because intellectually they might accept that you know better than them, but sometimes they want to experience it themselves. And if humans are built that way, then of course you have free will, because he might tell you not to do it, but you might come, but you know what? How bad is it really? Let me experience it for myself, because I know he said it's bad. I know that he knows what's bad is, but still, I just want to experience it. We have that built into us, and we can see it in children.
Talk to my scars, broken bones, and all the hospital visits.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I can see that. So you sort of explained your reasoning as to why you may not answer straight away. But I think it is useful to say, well, okay, there's presuppositions here, but going with your example. Yet it doesn't. I think the main point here is that it doesn't nullify your free will. They want to claim that if God told you what right and wrong is, or told you, quote unquote, what to do, then you don't have free will. And of course, that's not the case, unless you're a robot, which they're going to claim you're not. So as long as you're not a robot, then whatever information you get, you still have the ability to choose.
Consistent here. If I am given the ability to drink alcohol, and then I'm given the ability to produce alcohol, and I'm given the ability to consume this alcohol, then obviously I would be consuming alcohol, yes.
No, but if this matrix thing, this thing that gets downloaded into Matrix every day tells you not to drink alcohol, would you still drink alcohol?
That is logically inconsistent. I cannot be told not to drink alcohol when I'm given the possibility to produce alcohol and consume alcohol, and alcohol is good for me. Then this doesn't make sense. It's illogical.
Heroin? Do you consume heroin?
What point are you trying to make now?
Well,
I just told you that it's illogical. Now you're bringing the next example. Should I show you how many examples are you going to bring that I show that they are illogical?
Well, I'll establish it, yeah? So you just made a point that because something can be made by human beings, that this can be taken and used by human beings and eaten by human beings because we can do it. But the point here is this. We used alcohol as a basic example, and you said, oh, we've got the means to make it and pour it and whatever it may be. So we got the means to make heroin. So do you believe heroin would be okay in the same principle?
Absolutely. If this is something that is good for our bodies, yes.
But that's the main point, right? He's using heroin because we quote unquote know that heroin is bad for us. But the whole point is, how do we know that it's bad? If God just said it's bad, and we knew that He was all good, we could still go, okay, we won't do it. But the human condition is, well, let me just test it to see, right? Because like I said, that's what children and young people do.
That would have actually been a better way of doing it.
They know that you know best for them, but they will still do it anyway. So that doesn't negate that. The whole point here we've got to keep in mind is they're saying, hey, if God, quote unquote, downloads or sends you what's right and wrong, or gives you the clear message as opposed to through, vague, inconsistent, error-prone book, then that will take away your free will. And of course, the answer is, I think it's very clear now, is of course it will not take away your free will.
Yeah.
And in these
I did not think of that at the time.
Yeah. And I think in these sort of discussions, it's like, what's the main point here? Because it's easy to forget it as we go through it, and it happens to me as well. It's like, what's the original point? Okay, it's about this free will, and does God downloading it negate your free will? Because the conversation will go all over the show, and then it's kind of like, to try and bring it back to that original point. And he's trying to say, yes, it would violate your free will. And of course, the answer is no, it wouldn't.
Is alcohol good for our bodies?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And based upon what?
When you said absolutely, what were you thinking there? Because that was quite a strong statement. You and I talked about it the other day, and you might have evidence for it. So when you said absolutely, what was your, if he was going to ask, which he just did, what's that based on? What before we listen to you, what was going through your mind at that stage?
Well, the first thing that went through my mind is, it says so in the Quran. But the other thing is, a certain amount of alcohol is actually beneficial for you. The second thing is, and this was actually the second thing that went through my mind, the body actually fucking produces alcohol. Okay, how can the body produce alcohol if it's going to kill you? I mean, your body doesn't produce your own toxin that you're going to die from. That's crazy.
Okay, I suppose the only thing that I'm thinking in that you've now introduced something else. Now they're going to challenge you on that. So if you bring up those extra things, they are, I suppose, because you brought it up, they're then going to go off on that. Well, provide me the evidence, show me the peer review paper, because it helps them to divert away. And if they can make a small point against you, if they could, then somehow they think they've won the larger argument, which they haven't. And I was saying it to somebody else as well. It's a case of like,
the obedient child.
Yeah, it's like, don't bring in extra things that allows them to go off on a tangent, because they might get a small win, i.e. that you can't immediately produce the evidence for it. But then, that's taken as like, oh, look how he stops, when in fact the bigger point was around the free will thing, and now that point has got lost because the tangents have gone off this. And I know it's easy to do. Yeah. And it's a case of like trying to be disciplined and not bring in anything that will allow them to...
Okay, can we rewind, please? Can we put this back in there? Put me in there now.
Put you where?
Into the same situation.
So you mean what he's saying now? Okay, well, prove it.
No, as a save game. Reset the game until this point so that I can go in there now.
Right, yeah. That would be good, huh? It would be the same for all of us, right? That we could do so many, when we think about it afterwards. But that's part of the, the learning process, I think, and you've been doing it longer than I have. And hopefully I get better over time as well, because I kind of go, what could I have done differently there? What did I say? What did I miss? What could I bring that's even stronger? How can I communicate it even better? And, I think that helps over time.
Our bodies produce alcohol.
So can I just step in just for 1 minute?
Please. We got someone else waiting. Might be an idea if you go and watch the screen.
Sorry, but I'm just going to go back to because I think you made a very interesting point, and I like the point that you made, which was that if you have
Hamza
somebody
is trying
who's
to get
testing
rid of me.
and they're the programmer, then they would know automatically what the outcome is. And definitionally, we know that God would be all-knowing, according to our understanding of God, and therefore would know the outcome of anything. So why do the test in the first place? Almost, as you seem to be saying that. And if someone has a negative outcome, then this is bad programming to start with.
I'm not sure you said that, did you, or allude to that?
Yeah.
Did you?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
So there's a flaw within this. So the assumption within this way of thinking about the theisms generally is that the reason that God has created the earth is somehow to create a utopia. This is not that. This is an area of testing. So the question comes, well, if God knows the outcome, why do the test in the first place? And that's what you seem to be asking. If God knows the outcome, why do the test in the first place? And we don't have to really think too hard about this, because we've had.
Well, you should.
Yeah, I understand. What I'm saying is not that you shouldn't not that you shouldn't think hard.
He didn't understand what you meant by that, of course.
No.
About it, but it's not necessary. And because I'm about to give you an example of why something happened very recently that would tell you why this is the case. So we have had lots of people who have not been able to sit their exams because of COVID. Now, what's happened is that these people were judged and given a mark according to the understanding that their teachers had about their abilities. This understanding was built over maybe a couple of years, and they decided, actually, this is what you should get. You should get C, B, A, whatever that might be. And people were not happy with it. They were saying, no, this is unjust.
That was enough
because
for me.
I've been working I know this is how I was performing, but I've been working very hard, and maybe I'll get this.
Imran, can you get to the point? Because you're just bringing the old school teacher argument. It's nonsense.
It is that argument, but it's very important because.
No, it's not. It's childish.
Well, let me explain it. Then you can tell me what you think about it.
No, Imran, I know this. Come on, I can tell you immediately how to refute it, how to debunk it even.
Let me make it, and you can do that. This is a conversation. First time I'm talking to you.
Yeah, but people are complaining that this is taking a lot of time, but then you're wasting time.
Oh, you see, that gave them a way out to get you off the show. So, I mean, if you wanted to get off, that's fine. But I
didn't.
Okay. Yeah, I think that was a misstep to say that, because now...
I was going to debunk the teacher thing, showing exactly why it is so unbelievably stupid.
But I think at this stage now, because you had allowed him to speak so much in the beginning, he wanted to go through the whole story again. And I agree that the analogy is deeply flawed, but it gave them an excuse now to kick you off. And of course, that's pretty much what happens almost in the next few moments, I think.
Time but telling me things I already know, and you're taking a lot of time to doing it.
Okay, then what I suggest then, you're right. Maybe we are taking too much time with yourself. So what I suggest you do is come on again. We're on again in 2 weeks' time. Have a look at our stream.
I can't.
Yeah, I know, but the fact that you lost patience at this point gave them the out, even though they didn't understand that. It gave them the out to say, okay, they're going to get rid of you. But now, okay, we've got it on record that he's invited you to come back again, right? So we've got
But Hamza has disinvited me.
Make sure that this lingers in the air, that Imran has invited you back. Now, if Hamza hasn't invited you back, then you can ask Imran, hey, but at whatever the time is, okay, but I've split this into two. Towards the end, just before I left, you actually invited me back. Let's just make sure we hear those words again, 124:15. Let's just go back here.
Okay, what I suggest then, you're right. Maybe we are taking too much time with yourself. So what I suggest you do is come on again. We're on again in 2 weeks' time. Have a look at our stream.
I can't. I have my own show. I can't come here all the time.
Then enjoy your show.
When does your show finish?
It depends. It's never the same thing. It was early today, and this is why I was able to come here today.
Okay.
I have been telling you people for the last 10 years, come on the show and let's talk about these things. And now, all of a sudden, after 10 years, you come and you make this your show the same time as our show. And now suddenly you say, well, we can't talk.
You were the furthest thing from my mind when I decided what to do.
I've not actually heard of the gin and tonic show. No disrespect, I personally have not come across it myself. So, but it's nice talking to you, and I hope we get to speak again whenever it's mutually convenient.
Watch the video and try and respond when you can then. Take care.
Okay, that's what we're doing right now, obviously.
Ta-da. Bye.
You're so happy to do to me. So I have been cancelled.
Yeah. And look, it's difficult. The same sort of thing happened to me on EF Dawa, right? They got to a point where they wanted to get rid of me. They had to try and find a way to do it. You kind of gave them, not on purpose, but you gave them an easy way to get rid of you.
That's true.
I wanted to do the objective morality or the problem of evil with EF Dawa the other night. And they didn't want to do that. And I look back and I was silly to go down the whole thing of the belief thing with Hamza. I should have just left that, gone straight to the evolution, straight to the objective morality. So, it's a learning process. What's the main arguments? What's the ones that I can really sink the teeth into, where there's much more chance of getting at least exposing the argument as weak or showing that there's better answers out there. And that's, again, learning for all of us, I guess. There's a small bit here where they now talk about you after you left. So let's critique and finish that, and then that'll bring the video to the end. Sorry, Pierre, we didn't include your bit here.
I just quickly want to give a very brief summary, because one thing that we need to learn from this is to, if there are questions, go and answer the questions as quickly as possible. Because what you need to do is you need to turn it around. I was far too passive because I'm on my best behavior. I'm trying to be extremely polite, extremely courteous, extremely everything. And as you can see, this doesn't always work. So what you need to do, if this really is a case, if you're coming on a stream, you don't know what's happening, and this is what I will do in the future. Okay, I will ask, listen, is there something specific that you want? Let's get to it. And then let's get to it very, very quickly. This is just what Rob said. Get through the stuff as quickly as possible to get down to you asking the questions, to you making your point, to you doing what you want to do, to ask them the questions. So we definitely need to change this around. And this is something that I forgot.
Cool. All right, let's finish the last little bit here. That's 7 minutes. Well, 7 minutes of video. I don't know how long it'll take us to get through it. Let's see.
Finish that point, Hamza, very quickly.
It's a bit. Beach, sorry, I didn't see the message. I don't. Well, I've been told by Hamza never to come back. He's pissed off with me, so I was cancelled. Have good fun.
I don't know. Let's see next time, right? Who knows? Maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. But Imran has certainly invited you back there. So, I mean, if Hamza's going to overrule Imran in his own channel, that's fine. If it's the UF Dawa channel, then that's. Maybe there's a hierarchy there as well. Who knows? But at least he did invite you back. Maybe he'll take that invitation. He'll withdraw his invitation. But he certainly made it. We all heard it, and I wanted that to linger there for a moment in case somebody says that you weren't. Then we can point to Imran and say he did. Hey, Imran, can stop spamming. Can't come back because in fact you invited him. at the end, just before he left, or you guys kicked him off.
And an atheist cannot burn in hell. An atheist is made of unburnable material.
Yeah, I think
Incombustible.
I think that guy's a bit of a lunatic. I would be afraid to have him around anybody that is not his religious people. He probably needs to be needs psychiatric help. But it is what it is.
What justice would demand is that actually the person who's going to have a consequence from whatever test there is that they actually do the test. Imagine you're created.
He doesn't understand it. He does not understand the logical implications of what he is saying. He doesn't check his own line, what he is saying. It comes out of his mouth, but it doesn't go back into the brain, or it hasn't passed through the brain beforehand. He's just regurgitating things that he's heard somewhere.
Imagine you walk into the school and the teacher says, "Oh, I know you completely, you get an A. I know you completely, you get a B." Now, the problem with that is actually the person hasn't done any tests, so that would be inherently unjust. So justice requires a test to actually take place.
That's only the case if the teacher is not omniscient. If the teacher is omniscient, no test is necessary from the teacher's point of view. Why would the teacher, if the teacher is all-knowing? You see, this is where the analogy fails. If the teacher is all-knowing, no test is required, because the teacher already knows exactly whatever the mark is or whatever the result will be. Then the test is completely irrelevant. But if the teacher doesn't know this, or just has a high probability, then there's a possibility that the person can either do very poorly or very well. So the analogy has to include an all-knowing teacher, otherwise it's disanalogous. It's dead in the water.
There's another. The number one thing that I would do is say, can the teacher be wrong? But the second thing is, the teacher did not create me knowing in advance whether I was going to fail this test. So that gives another level of stupidity to this whole, I don't know what to call it.
Yeah. This is just a horribly flawed analogy.
Yeah.
The whole teacher thing, trying to make an analogous with God. If you don't include that the teacher's omniscient, that is a key point, and to not include that just makes it completely disanalogous. And that's why I say every time, or almost every time, I actually can't think of a time when they have, but I'm going to be charitable. Almost every single time I hear a Muslim apologist bring up an analogy, in my mind I'm going, this is likely going to be disanalogous. And an analogy is only useful, like I've said before, if the interlocutor doesn't understand something, then you go, okay, here's what it's like to try and get them to understand. But otherwise,
as an explanation.
Yeah. Otherwise, the analogy isn't useful unless you're preaching to the crowd or whatever the case is.
Exactly, and this is exactly what he's doing. Yeah.
And this is the purpose of here. But
listen, he lost me when he said alcohol is good for the body.
Yeah, I agree.
Just for anything. And this is
Okay, but yeah, so again, I think you could probably have shown this, right? But I think that's the case again, where you made a claim that allowed them to sort of go off. And we've just got to be so careful about not adding extra information that allows them to take the conversation in a tangent.
No,
but it's not easy to do, is it? Because it pops into your head and you just suddenly blurt something out, which you've got evidence for.
You're
but
so
then you
right.
can't take it back, right? And it allows them to go off like they have now.
And I should have just asked, okay, is it objectively bad for the body? Finished.
Yeah, and you and I have, had a chat about this. When I looked at this, the jury was out. But again, you might have more information on it than me. But it's certainly...
but then it's regardless. It's regardless of whether or not. It's if I ask him, is it objectively wrong? Or is it wrong by any margin? Or what do you base your information on that it is in fact wrong? Then I am not taking the burden of proof. But I'm telling him, you are making the claim. Now, on top of everything else, you need to also show that this is a correct claim. Instead of me taking the burden and say, well, actually, it's good. And so I am now making the claim. I now need to show. That's exactly what you've pointed out. So, stop doing it. Stop saying things. Making claims. Let them do the explaining.
I think that's true. Well, obviously, I agree with you on that. I think the one thing, though, that I'd also have a thought on is, I think to the best of our ability, it's helpful if we can answer their questions without giving more information than would take it off on a tangent. Because if we throw every question back, if we are, because they're not going to change their mind, doesn't matter what we say, right? If we presented them irrefutable evidence, like the inheritance error, they're still going to keep believing, they're still going to rationalize it. But for the audience, if we don't answer questions, we keep throwing the burden of proof back, they never get to hear our view on things or why something we don't agree with it, or in the case of alcohol. So if Hamza said to me, do you think alcohol is bad for you? My current view, and you can add some more information to it, my current view is the jury's out for me. I've read articles that have said 1 glass of wine a night it can prevent heart disease to some degree, but when I looked into it a bit more deeply, some of the medical advice was that it's inconclusive. That's a possibility, but it's inconclusive. So at the moment, I would say I'm undecided on that view. The parts that I've read there say it's inconclusive. If that's the case, I'm going to take an undecided position. What else can I do? I'm not unless I had more convincing evidence either that it was wrong, any alcohol was wrong, or that it was right. Then obviously I'd change my position. But we're talking about
Rob,
any
the Quran
alcohol.
says
It's not like drinking yourself into a stupor. That's not what we're talking about. Even if I know that you say the Quran doesn't say it, but even if the Quran said it, right? Presumably the Quran is talking about any amount of alcohol, not just.
No, it says it's good for you. It says it's good for you.
Yeah, okay, you could argue that point, but let's assume that the point that they make is they're taking the one position, right? Because as you've said, it says it's good for you, it says it's bad for you. But let's assume that we're going with their view, which is it's bad for you. Then the jury's out from a evidential point of view, as far as we can tell. And when we say it's the jury's out, we're saying any amount of alcohol. We're not saying in a stupor. Because if the Quran said, hey, if you drink more than 5 glasses is bad for you or something like that, that's not what it's saying, even if we went with that particular interpretation.
It does. It says don't give the prayer when you're drunk.
Yeah, which would be X amount of alcohol, right?
Exactly.
Cool, okay.
This is the second time now, second atheist. I hope my man here is not going to make it third. They said they wouldn't listen to God if they spoke to him, if they spoke to them.
No, that's not. That's my understanding is that's not what you said. It's certainly not what Tom Jump says. I don't remember exactly what you said, but Tom was very clear. If God existed, and I'm sure you'd say the same, and the evidence was overwhelming, we'd accept that he exists. But if he said, hey, do this, and we asked for a reason why, we wouldn't just accept it because he told us, because of the Euthyphro problem. So if we said, okay, here's a God, or here's a being, let's say a powerful being, because you're begging the question that it's a God, because God entails that it's all good. Well, how do we know it's all good? And that's what I certainly got from Tom. I don't know if you were the same. I don't remember specifically what you said.
Okay, if you were to push me, I would say, look, there's no way that I'm going to, even if a God tells me to stick a knife into a baby, I will not do it. So you would, I wouldn't.
Okay, but that's the actual point that you guys were making. It's not that you would accept that a God exists, but you would question whether the commands that were given, certainly the moral commands, were in fact good or bad, and how do you establish it?
Exactly.
That's the point. Let me just just go back that just so we can make sure we've got that. I've got that correct from him. So let's just hear that again.
So justice requires a test to actually take place, and this is the purpose of here. But
listen, he lost me when he said alcohol is good for the body.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just for anything. And this is the second time now, second atheist. I hope my man here is not going to make it third. They said they wouldn't listen to God if they spoke to him. If they spoke to them.
No, it's not that they wouldn't listen. They would question God's moral commands. That's the point. Again, you missed it, right? Yeah.
I mean, there's levels of not believing in a God, but even if God existed, you still wouldn't listen. I mean, that's mad.
It's not that you wouldn't listen, you would question it. If this God existed and he said do X or do Y, we go, why should we do X or Y? We're not just going to a priori accept it, take it on faith, because you haven't established that the God is all good. If you could establish that, then we could potentially take it, take whatever his command is and go, okay, we've now established that it's an all good God. He knows all things. Therefore, we're just going to accept it. We're not going to ask for evidence. But at this stage, you haven't established that. That's why they're asking that question. Not that they won't listen to the God. Of course, they're going to listen to hear what he's going to say. And they could accept it or not. In this case, it's the moral commands.
Madness. That's twice now. Anyway, let's see if third time's a charm. And I'm happy to see, honestly, the best thing I've heard today so far by 3 atheists who think they know their stuff is the fact that evolution doesn't disprove the existence of a creator, when so many atheists have brought this as proof. You stupid theist, evolution is true, so that proves you.
Did you hear what he said there? Proves your, and he stopped short. Proves your God doesn't exist. Let's just go back on that again. 126:18. Let's just go back a little bit here. Listen again. He's going to stop short of saying it though.
When so many atheists have brought this as proof. You stupid theist, evolution is true, so that proves you. Alhamdulillah, atheists have
Exactly.
learned something today. If that's all they've learned today,
He was going to say your God, which is exactly what they do say, and he stopped short because his original claim was that it disproves God, like some nebulous view of a God.
Alhamdulillah.
Now, it's funny that he said he's going to keep religion and gods out of it completely. Listen to what he's doing now.
Yeah, I mean that's just not possible, right? Well, certainly not possible to keep a God out of it. It depends on religion, but yeah.
I don't get the idea of nature.
Lots of atheists with NDE said they felt such cold place they called out to God. What a load of bollocks. What is this? That's like saying I felt lonely and I called out to God or something. Oh my God, who makes such a
Are
stupid
you
claim?
reading
All right.
comments, or what are you talking about now?
Yeah.
Oh,
There's a guy here who says lots of atheists who NDE. Okay, it said they felt such cold place that they called out to God.
I'm not sure who he's referring to there.
And yet when it does something, you can tell nature is not moral.
Yeah, he completely misunderstood Tom's argument. So no wonder he's making fun of it. If you're ignorant of a particular topic and you've not and you misunderstand it, then of course it ends up being a straw man, and then in your eyes, because of your misunderstanding, it sounds silly, and so then you're going to laugh about something, not realizing that you've straw manned it or misunderstood it. And then obviously it's going to sound silly to you.
The other thing is you need to look at his background. You need to understand the psyche a bit. So when he says he is not going to listen, I don't think he means listen. I think he actually means to obey.
Sorry, in respect to what?
Remember we were talking just now about it when that he says, well, that these atheists say they're not going to listen to God. And we said, well, yeah, we are going to listen but not obey. But I think for him, to listen means obey.
Yeah, but obey what though? Normally it's moral commands. If God says that there's the sun, you're not going to question that because you can see it, right? There's evidence there. So it's talking about the moral commands, in which case, yes, you wouldn't obey those without establishing that God was omnibenevolent, and ideally why it's wrong. Because he's created us with this inquiring mind. So and it's the same with children, right? So if we're going to use that, we're just grown-up children, and we are children compared to supposedly an all-knowing God, right? So we don't know much. Just like a child will ask why. My children ask why all the time. I'm like getting it all the time now. So if God is a quote unquote in the analogy a parent to us as adults, because we are so we know nothing as a child knows nothing compared to us. Then we have the inquiring mind of why, and to simply say, well, don't do this because I'm all good is unsatisfying, and he's built into us this curiosity. So that's he's not satisfying his own creation. And if the test is to just simply accept it like a sheep would because he says so or because he's all good,
exactly,
then that violates his own the creation himself.
Yeah.
So it's like you built a bug into the system, and the test is to try and overcome a bug that the God put into the system.
Yeah. And Ross, yes, we are atheists.
There was nothing that was definitive that people could claim that my logic and our logic was flawed or anything like that.
Okay, well, obviously, Stops tried to do that. Tom tried to do that. You either didn't understand or you wouldn't accept it, I understand. And obviously, we've done part 1. This is part 3 of this whole stream. We had to break it up. I'll try and link them all together. But if you go back to part 1, we've done a fairly good critique of the initial claims there, and I think we've definitely seriously rebutted, if not refuted, Imran's claims there. So the fact that he comes to this part now, thinking that, but that's the standard response. I don't think they're going to come. I've never heard any of these guys in particular come and say, do you know what, that was a substantial response. Really, I've got to go away and think about that. No matter what response you give them, they are going to feel like it's insubstantial, either because they don't understand it or because they just bulldoze over it, because they have an audience that they need to, keep. They need to be in high regard with the audience. So, if they can't answer something, that doesn't look good, I guess, in their eyes. Where for the rest of us, that's intellectual humility. If you don't know something, you're going to say, "Hey, I don't know that," and that's what Hamza should have said with the youth of a dilemma, but instead, and admitted that he didn't know, and then just jumped in with both feet. I mean, that's not a good way to go.
I wonder whether he's actually going to read up on it and then understand it.
Yeah, it's one thing to read up on it. The other is to understand why atheists
It's
or
a dilemma,
philosophers even feel like the youth of a dilemma is a significant challenge to an all-good God.
Yeah.
And the responses that certain Christians would get, because they're more sophisticated normally than Muslims in theology, in theological responses, isn't sufficient either. So, I very much doubt that he'll gain the understanding of why we feel that it's a significant impasse. And then for him to, I don't think he would have even a remotely substantial response to it.
Shit. And now Sabur comes back. I missed him by what, a minute?
Well, yeah, it was a little while. I think he came back a little bit after that because we've snipped out Pio. We just couldn't do another one as well. It was just too long.
Ah, okay. Because I was just going to say it's a
This
pity.
is
I
all.
would have loved to take him on. And I think it's very
a lot of the
very highly unprofessional. I think if people go and sit on there and just eat, really, I don't know why. I have this aversion to this for some reason.
Okay.
Don't you?
things that people were holding.
I don't know. I don't pay attention to it. I mean, I sometimes drink on a stream. I don't know if I eat. I don't remember that I have because normally I'm trying to listen and pay attention. But I
Okay.
don't know. It doesn't. I don't
I
really
just think it's
about it so
impolite for
much.
some
On to
reason.
like the
I'm
cyclical
not saying
universe,
it's
etc.
not. I just haven't really thought about it.
Okay.
And this idea that morality is some sort of emergent property that is like gravity but doesn't change when everything else in nature changes. These things are all either very, very
Oh, goodness.
hypothetical or
Yeah. Okay. So they again just demonstrating that
Yeah.
they didn't understand Tom's argument. I like I say, I don't think that I don't agree with that particular argument, but you first got to understand it before you can really challenge it seriously. And I think there's a complete lack of understanding of his argument, and the responses demonstrate that. So again, go back and watch part 2 of our thing where they tried to respond to Tom Jump's objective morality, which, like I say, I don't necessarily agree with. But you've got to have a better understanding of it. You've got to be able to steelman it before you can really critique it in any substantial way.
actually don't make any sense if you think about them. And I was quite surprised that people were bringing these arguments, and in quite an arrogant and aggressive way. It's
No, I'm just thinking where was the arrogance or aggressive way? I mean, what is it that you actually want? Somebody to tiptoe around, yes sir, no sir? Do they have to speak with a slow voice? I mean, I didn't hear Tom at all arrogant. He was, because sometimes Tom is arrogant. I've watched quite a few of Tom's videos, and sometimes he is arrogant, sometimes he's like a bull in a china shop. But in this particular case, I never saw a single, I do not remember, maybe somebody can correct me, I didn't see a single time where you could remotely say that Tom was arrogant in any way. And even
I
if
think
you
the
stopped,
same was true for me. I also know
you
I
were-
can be a bull in a china shop.
you were on your best behavior as well. I mean, it was only at the end there where I think eventually your patience ran out because you'd heard that teacher analogy, you already knew it. But apart from that, there was virtually nothing. So, I mean, his characterization that there was some arrogance or aggressiveness there, I mean, again, all you have to argue, you see, this is what happens with these Muslim apologists. They get a free pass when they make these claims. We've got to nail them on these claims. What's your evidence for that? What's the argument for that? Don't allow them to get away with it, because they are so used to making these grandiose claims and never having to defend it. And we've got to get them on that every single time. As soon as you hear something, right, all of us, it's I'm saying it to remind myself as well, but we've all got to go, what's the argument for that? Hey, you just made that claim. Because otherwise the claim doesn't get challenged, and the gullible Muslim audience in particular goes, wow, that was good.
Wow, exactly.
All it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
an unsubstantiated claim that never got a chance to be challenged.
And Pio is
Surprising.
complaining.
Sorry, who?
Pio.
What is that about?
Pio is complaining
About what? I didn't see it. Sorry, I'm not looking at the chat.
that you cut him out.
Oh, yeah. I just thought there was too many. If you want to do one on that, Pio, we could do that. By that stage, No, I'm not. No, he says he's not complaining. There we go. Okay, let's finish this off, shall we, quickly?
Because we need to engage with each other in a good way and to try to help each other understand our perspectives. But there was
Yeah, but
nothing
that's
really
not the way.
solid that I saw from the atheists, unfortunately. But it was good to have them on. I think it was nice
It
discussion.
didn't help that they didn't realise we were factory resetting them and we'd come from a completely different angle. They were just coming with the old cliches, and it was like, you need
Yeah, sorry, I must have missed that. Maybe you were on a different stream, Hamza. I never saw a single, quote, factory reset. I think, in fact, the opposite is the case. Maybe the reset is required on your end. So I think it's like looking in the mirror and not recognizing that you're speaking about yourself there, probably. But I don't really expect a lot more, I guess, in this sort of response. I just want to see if there's anything they say here that we can finally finish with, because he did ask us to go watch. Even Imran asked us to go watch the video and to respond, and that's exactly what we're doing now.
to watch the stream, man. You know what I mean? We don't say God exists. We say we believe God exists.
Okay, but it's basically the same thing. If you believe God exists, that's your epistemic claim, and that's based on your idea, the ontological claim that there is a God, or in your case, that Allah's there. So
You are
yes, they are
convinced that
slightly
it is,
separate,
yeah.
but one entails the other. You're not going to say I believe a God exists and then not have the idea about the ontology of God existing. I mean, it's just silly.
So we're going to do this again in 2 weeks' time, yes, Sabor?
So,
Sorry?
Sabor, your socialized atheism is really, this is the key here, isn't it? Do you want to just give us just a summary, and then we'll finish with that, inshallah?
So, very interesting concept in the Quran, which is mentioned again and again, is how human beings have this taxonomy to choose from in terms of their behavior, right? Or they fit into this sort of taxonomy.
Again, Sabur, where's the Quran say this? Just show us in the Quran. This is probably some interpretation of yours, but I'm happy again. Just provide us evidence. Let's read the verses together and see if they actually say what you're saying, or are you taking a very cherry-picked version of your particular interpretation?
They either follow their culture, their forefathers, and society, or their desires, or their reason. And Allah says in Surah Mulk that when the angels ask the people why they are going to hellfire, the people say, because if only we listened and we reasoned, we would not be of the people of hellfire. So reason, not following reason, is the reason why people end up in hellfire. Reason will lead you to Allah. Reason will lead you to Islam. Reason will lead you to what the truth is. Now, when it comes to...
We've all heard there, right? That's his claim. Reason will lead you there, right? So it's clear, and again, like Ralph was the opposite of that, right? The right reaction, because he was saying, no. When you read a book, you've got to read it with faith, or whatever the case is, right? And he was bigging up the Muslims. Here they are refuting Ralph. So just in case Ralph was ever watching, the Muslims disagree with you on this, by the way. And it's a rare case. I agree that you use reason. Obviously, I don't agree that it's going to lead you to Allah or any of these claims. But I think reading a book with faith is just completely unreliable.
Atheism, atheists try to posit themselves as, we just came to the conclusion of God's existence, God's non-existence by ourselves. We came to this idea of biological evolution being true, Darwinism being true by ourselves. And when you actually talk to them, you can start to recognize very quickly, none of that is true. None of that is true. They're actually purely socialized into this sheepish or...
This is throwing boulders in a glass house. The irony of saying that this is sheepish. Presumably, let's see if we can steel man him. Presumably what he's actually saying is, hey, atheists haven't looked into this and they just believe this on faith. Presumably that's what he's saying.
Of course it is. That's the only thing you
throwing
can
boulders
say.
in a glass house
Of
with
course.
what Muslims do in the Quran, boy, you really don't have a leg to stand on. You can make that critique, but you're doing it in a glass house that is shattered every time you look in any direction. The amount of sheep that believe things in a book that is so ambiguous, you're repetitive and error prone. I mean, talking about sheep, goodness gracious. The irony here is so thick, I can use a cleaver on this one.
sheeple, right? That's the best way of describing them. And I'm not saying Muslims don't do this.
Virtually every Muslim does. There's almost every Muslim does. There might be one or two I can't think of hand, but I'm open to the possibility. Almost every Muslim does. So it's not like just some. You guys do it. Virtually every Muslim does it.
Saying they do and they shouldn't, because they're told not to
Okay, well, you lead by example then. If you're going to make the claim that they shouldn't, then lead by example. You're not doing it at the moment.
do taqleed and blindly follow. They're told to reason, to think, to reflect. However, they can't just blindly say religious people.
Just stop there for a moment. This is a misconception. And you hear this from Muslims all the time. No, you are not. You are told to look at the Quran. You're supposed to reason with the Quran. You're supposed to learn from the Quran. You're supposed to ponder over the Quran. You're supposed to reflect on the Quran. You're not, and you hear this from Muslims all the time, that you are being challenged to look at nature. No, you are not. It's the opposite. It says, do not question anything if the answer might make you uncomfortable. Don't do that. Only look at what the Creator gave you, and that is the Quran. So, you hear this all the time, but if you know the Quran a bit, no, it's wrong.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. That particular verse, even if you didn't bring in the don't question if it becomes uncomfortable or whatever there is, the other one of ponder this book, the straightforward understanding for me is just keep trying to understand this book. It does not imply, as far as I'm concerned, that means go and ponder the world out there and try and match this book to reality. See whether this book stands up to reality. It's more a case of, as you say, ponder this book until you sort of either accept it or whatever the case is. And of course, they've got the unfalsifiable thing. Well, hey, if you just look at this with an open heart and an open mind, I don't know what an open heart is. I only know of open heart surgery. So that's obviously, presumably, that's metaphorical, but it's kind of meaningless, vacuous statement. But hey, even if we get rid of that vacuous statement, hey, if you just look at this open-mindedly, you'll come to the conclusion it is. So the presupposition is that if you do not come to the conclusion that it's true, then you must be closed-minded.
Yeah, well, and you need to be a truth seeker, and you must be sincere.
Yeah.
People are blind followers. We're going to say, yes, we do have blind followers amongst us, but here's why we should reason. However, don't try and pretend like you don't have the same problem.
What did he just say?
I don't know. Do you want to go back on it?
Listen to this. This is gibberish.
Or sheeple, right? That's the best way of describing them. And I'm not saying Muslims don't do this. I'm saying they do and they shouldn't, because they're told not to do taqleed and blindly follow. They're told to reason, to think, to reflect. However, they can't just blindly say religious people are blind followers.
He's claiming that, hey, atheists can't say religious people are blind followers.
Okay, now listen to the next part.
Yeah, his claim is that atheists are blind followers.
I'm going to say, yes, we do have blind followers amongst us, but here's why we should reason. However, don't try and pretend like you don't have the same problem. I've been to atheist conferences. I know about atheists a lot. They don't really act any differently to born-again Christians. They really don't. I mean, the first guy, T-Jump, he flat out refused to accept that Dawkins was doing anything malicious.
Well, because he wasn't. And your assertion that he was, we've shown is not the case. So the fact that you think that he flat out refused is because he doesn't believe that Dawkins did anything malicious, and neither do we. So what?
Which for me was unbelievable. Academics have written.
I can understand why it's unbelievable, because you've got a particular blinkered view of Dawkins. He's your hobby horse that you ride, and you've got it in your mind that he's dishonest. So any nuanced discussion, anything that where we try to explain to you and show you why that's not the case, you're just going to ignore. So I understand why you think it's unbelievable. When you have a closed mind and you've got your conclusion already, which is the same with Islam, you start with the conclusion and work backwards, then obviously anything else is going to be unbelievable.
And
but
he's
again,
going to show us now.
I'm questioning whether that's the critical way of thinking, and I would suggest it's not.
And he's going to show us exactly that now.
We just took out a YouTube clip, but academics have written about how he is manipulative. In fact, I just want to share this quick thing. Dawkins wrote the book, The Self-Fit Gene.
Oh, this is me.
Okay.
obviously
They don't
about
know
that
this
book and,
account yet,
how
so they
popular
put
it
this
was
on
and
the
whatnot.
screen.
Now, there's an academic who's actually written a book, and I want you guys to just check out the title of it. Just going to share my screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is written by a mainstream secular academic, The Selfish Genius, right? Which
Who
is
the
a
fuck
play on the
cares?
selfish gene. So it's talking about how Richard Dawkins has completely misrepresented Darwin to suit his neo-atheist narrative. And
His neo-atheist narrative.
where will you
It's
find
not.
He's got his own
Sorry,
words
I'm,
for
I'm
this,
just,
right?
I'm just
It's
laughing
like-
about.
Yeah.
Actually, I'd like to see his tab screen. I suppose these are all people who say something about Professor Dawkins.
Yeah. I mean, like Michael Roos, right? That's one of his hobby horses he rides as well. Because Roos is an accommodationist. So he thinks that you can accommodate religion because, hey, there's certain reasons why there's
Yeah,
even though he
and
claims
why
to
not
an
be nice
atheist.
to them? Yeah, exactly.
And Jerry Coyne and others have really
He's
had a go at him.
bashed
But
him.
he'll cherry pick those guys because they're, quote, atheists, but they are, what's the word? They favor religion for some practical or pragmatic reason. And so they are somewhat critical of, quote, the new atheists. And so Sabur jumps on that because, hey, this is not a Christian person. Well, who cares, right? All we care about is their arguments. And, of course, they have a bias because they are accommodating religion. So
Yeah, but
in some
Rob,
sense,
there's-
they're as bad, if not worse, than religious people.
Yeah, but there's no consensus.
a reasonable, rational person that is going to try and defend this type of behavior? I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous that despite the evidence that was given to T-Jump, he's just flat out refusing to accept Dawkins done anything wrong. I mean, I spend a lot of my time reading up and researching this type of stuff. And I don't do it just for fun. I'm trying to do it because I'm trying to show people the truth is. It is shocking that Dawkins has gotten away with murder. I mean, he's nearly, he's like nearly 76 or whatever years old. In terms of the public eye, he's seen as the main representative of evolution, all these types of things. However, in academia, he is someone who's regularly criticized and he's used as a baton, right? So what we have to recognize is that
he's not.
Yeah, some people might criticize him. So people criticize anybody that's in the public eye, that's influential, whatever the case is. Virtually everybody has critics.
Yeah, but he's criticized for his philosophy. He is not a philosopher. He's a biologist. People don't criticize him for his biology.
Well, maybe Roos does in the sense that he's misrepresenting Darwin. He's not misrepresenting the science in any way, and he's not misrepresenting. He's got a different view. Whatever Darwin's personal views on God or religion or its compatibility or not with natural selection is irrelevant. That's his personal views. Who cares what Darwin thinks? The only thing that Darwin is rightly known for is natural selection, right? That's the main thing. Dawkins has qualified critics and defenders, and so do the critics. So do his critics. Yeah, so there it is. Detective Inspector Monkfish has done obviously a lot more reading on these sort of topics than I have or you have, Stops, I think. So he's quite well read in some of those things.
Sort of behavior that T-Jump was exhibiting is not just that a few atheists do this. This is a standard behavior that new atheists have. And
what standard behavior? You mean when you claim that Dawkins has done something dishonest, we have a look at it, we bring it up on screen, I quote it word for word, I highlight it, I look at it, I examine it, I explain it, and I come to the conclusion that he's not being dishonest. This is somehow a bad thing, is it?
Are we
So we
allowed
should just
to
accept
disagree with
that he's
him?
dishonest because you say so.
Exactly.
No. We're going to examine everything that you say, and we're going to examine it with a critical eye. Unless, of course, you're suggesting that's a bad thing. We should just take your word for it. No.
But can Sabur be wrong?
Well, in his own mind, probably not.
Exactly.
it's good that you have people like this come on board and they talk like this. So we're not just attacking the straw man. People like this do act.
Yes, you are.
Yes, you are.
He exists.
Well, okay, let's be charitable. He's attacking what he thinks is the case, and he's simply mistaken. If we're super charitable, he's simply mistaken about his claim about Dawkins. But anyway, we've done that in part 1 and maybe even part 2. I think we did
Yeah.
it twice, and I brought the words up on screen.
Sorry?
Yeah, I think next time we should get the atheists to jump on straight away.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
probably
Good
one
idea.
thing I will agree. It was
Because
rare
we
that
get
I
it
agree with
out
Sabur,
anyway.
but that would probably be
Yeah,
the
that's
one thing.
no problem at all. So we're going to say a week on Friday, yeah?
Yeah, I think so.
Are
2
you
weeks
available
from
as
now.
well, Mr. Imran?
Alhamdulillah, of course, inshallah.
Oh, fantastic, bro.
Okay, so there we go. That's the end of that. I hope it's been useful, valuable. It's almost 12 o'clock my side and even later wherever Stops is. So thank you for that, Stops. And we could hop on Discord if you like. Let me put the Discord link in here. So if anybody...
Well, we can make a break now, and if anybody wants to come here, I don't know. Does anybody want to?
I suppose we could ask the question there. So let me thank you very much, Stops. I hope people got value from that. I hope there was something that people took away from that. Maybe there's a bit of education, bit of entertainment for all of us, right? I learned some things out of that as well. So I think that it's always valuable going over this. It's always
At
sometimes
least
not
some
so easy to hear
insights.
yourself, because we can always improve on what we did. And
Yeah.
hopefully next time we'll at least start on, unless something else comes up, we'll start on the EF Dawa live stream. That was a review of this. So we did a review of this. They did a review of. There was 5 Muslims plus a host, and they did quite a bit of a long intro again. And then I came in for, I don't know how long, half an hour, maybe it's longer. I can't remember how long it was. And so hopefully we'll get a chance to review that as well. So a review of their live stream, like Inception. And I'm sure there's things that I'll be able to hear myself say that I can go, hang on a moment, maybe I could have said this. And that's the way, I can learn to be better. And I hope Stops will point out where he thinks I could have done something different, because that'll help me in the future. So on that, I want to thank Stops as always. Thank you very much. Any
Well done,
parting
it's
words
fun.
on this particular stream topic?
Oh, are you waiting for me now?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. I just
No.
wanted
I
to-
thought I said no. Everything's
Okay.
good. Nothing else, and I'm looking forward to the next one, because it gives me a reason to, I don't know, to get away from the others, which are too much work.
Fair enough. We'll see what we can do over the week if Stops and I have time. It all depends. So keep an eye out. Obviously, it'll be in the evening times, probably like after 9 in the
Yeah,
evening
like
if we
after
do get a
this time,
chance.
yeah. I think it's a good time.
Let me just pop it here. So if there's anybody in the chat that wants to come on here and discuss anything that we've talked about here, ideally, otherwise we're going to go into all kinds of other topics, but if anybody in the chat wants to come in here and talk about anything they've heard, or the stream itself, or our analysis of it, then let us know now. We'll give the stream like a minute or two. If not, I'm posting into the chat now. I'm going to post it 3 times so it's clear. That's our Discord channel. Maybe
I was
Stops
just
and I
gonna
will
do
pop
that,
in there for a short amount of time if somebody joins. If you want to come and chat to us there, it's offline, it's not recorded. More people can join, so it's a bigger thing anyway. We can pop over there. So if you do want to join, type a 1 into the chat and we can drop the link. If you prefer to join on Discord, that's fine. If we don't see a 1 coming in on the chat in the next 1 minute, then we'll bring this to a close and we'll pop over to Discord. There's the link again. I'm just posting it one more time. Jump in there, we'll accept you in there, and we'll pop onto the voice chat there, and you can come in and have a chat and give us a thought or challenge something we've said, and we'd be happy to hear what you've got to say. So we'll give it a moment. There we go. That's the link there. Click on it if you like, if you've got it in text chat, or screenshot it, or whatever the case is. Pop in and that should take you straight to our Discord server. So on that note, again, thank you very much, Stops, for all your time, all your input as well. We finally got there. It does take a while to get through all of these things, because there's as you can have seen, there's a lot of claims that are made. Many of them are not substantiated, and this becomes the norm, unfortunately. So one does need to put their claims under the microscope, because they do a shotgun effect, or at least Imran did a few of those, and they're never actually either substantiates it, or in fact that particular part, I don't know, I'll have to go back and look where I specifically said, oh, I'm waiting for him to hear that, and we never got to that. Cool.
Give us a thumbs up or down. Either way is good. And
Yeah, we'd
we'll
appreciate
see
a
you
thumbs
whenever.
up. And as I say, Stops and I don't know if Stops, if you're available, we'll pop onto Discord. If anybody wants to join and talk, we'll be on there for about 10 minutes. We might stay on longer if somebody comes and wants to have a conversation.
Exactly.
If not,
That's a good way of putting it.
then we'll hopefully be together again at some point. Maybe there's still again this week. We'll have to see how it goes. Keep an eye, make sure you're subscribed, and then we'll get on to critiquing their review of their stream as opposed to our review of their stream. So it'll be
And
an
I forgot
Inception
to ask
like.
Ross Duncan, because Ross Duncan said he was the first time here, and he asked whether this was an atheist channel. So I would have loved to ask him what he thought of this. I have no idea whether he's an atheist or not, whether he what he thought of this, what we're doing, if this is interesting to other people, because he just happened to pop in. So this would have been interesting from a complete and total outsider to get the opinion. I would have been interested, but
Yeah.
I missed it. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. On that note, I want to bid you everybody good night. Good night to Stops. We'll pop over to Discord for a short while, or at least I will. Maybe Stops will join me, and we'll see you again hopefully this week, but I'm sure very soon. Thank you and good.